Ever feel like those city council meetings are a total mystery?
Yet have
Like what actually goes on in there?
Right.
Well, we're cracking open the minutes from their June 6th, 2024 meeting
Ooh,
to give you a peek behind the curtain.
very cool.
It's like a City Hall deep dive.
I like it. It's easy to forget that those meetings are where the sausage gets made, you know?
Totally.
Like, this is where our city's laws and budget actually come from. It
Yeah.
has a direct impact on your day-to-day life as a New Yorker.
And this particular meeting was a full house.
Oh, really?
All 51 council members were there. Even Reverend Jason Andre Ridley was there to give the invocation.
Wow. Okay, so they're not wasting any time at this meeting.
No, they jumped right in,
Uh-huh.
and they kicked things off with what are called home rule messages.
Right.
Have you heard of these?
I have. So for folks who maybe haven't spent their days poring over city council agendas,
Right.
home rule messages are basically like the city council sending a formal request to the state government saying, hey, can you please give us the authority to make this change that affects us locally?
So it's like asking your parents for permission to stay out past curfew.
Exactly.
Except instead of a later bedtime, we're talking about things like traffic cameras.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like SLR 8, for example, which we see in these minutes.
Yeah.
That one aimed to give the city more control over where those cameras are placed.
Interesting.
Interestingly, though, 11 council members actually voted against it.
Yeah, that caught my eye too. Why were they against it? What was behind those dissenting votes? Were they worried about the big brother aspect of more traffic cameras?
It's hard to say for certain without diving into individual statements and really trying to understand their reasoning.
Right.
But it does highlight how even something seemingly straightforward, like traffic cameras, can have different perspectives, right?
Totally.
It's a good reminder that these aren't just abstract issues. They directly affect people's lives
For sure.
and raise really important questions, especially in a city like New York. Like, how do we balance privacy versus safety?
Absolutely. And speaking of issues with potential ripple effects, SLR 9 stood out to me.
Okay, what's SLR 9 about?
This one proposed extending certain World Trade Center related benefits, things like healthcare, to employees who worked at the Verrazano Bridge Toll Facility.
Wait, really?
I know. It seems strange, right? What's the connection?
That's one of those wait what moments you find in the minutes sometimes. You really have to use your imagination to connect the dots.
Totally.
It likely has something to do with the bridge's role in the aftermath of 9/11, right?
Yeah.
Possibly as a security checkpoint or a crucial route for emergency vehicles.
Right.
It makes you think about all those hidden connections throughout the city, you know,
Totally.
and how events can have far-reaching consequences.
It's like a domino effect, but instead of tiles, it's legislation. Okay, so we've got these home rule messages, these fast-tracked requests to the state. What happens next in this legislative journey? So we just talked about those home rule messages, which is basically the city asking the state for permission to, like, change the rules on something.
Exactly.
But what about the stuff the city council can handle on their own?
Right. That's where the general orders calendar comes in.
Okay, the general orders calendar.
Yeah, think of it like
Like their to-do list.
kinda. It's like a restaurant menu.
Yeah.
But instead of appetizers and entrees, we've got proposed laws and resolutions,
Ooh, interesting.
all carefully prepped and ready for the full council to devour.
Or debate, hopefully politely.
Well, that's the idea, right?
So what was on the menu for this meeting? Anything that might directly affect my life as a New Yorker?
Quite possibly. One item that stood out to me was INT
Yeah.
743A.
No, 743A.
Let me see.
This one dealt with expanding career counseling for municipal employees.
Oh, interesting. So that means like,
That means anyone from your kid's teacher to the folks who keep the subways running.
oh, wow, that's a lot of people.
I wonder if that's like a response to the Great Resignation everyone's been talking about.
Could be.
Maybe the city trying to hold on to its workforce.
It's a good observation. And this one actually passed with unanimous consent, which is interesting.
Wow, unanimous. They must all agree that investing in those workers is important.
Definitely suggests a shared understanding that, like, when city workers are happy and supported, the city runs more smoothly.
Makes sense. Happy employees, happy city, right?
Right.
Okay, what else got the unanimous thumbs up?
Another one that caught my eye was INT.
No, 767A.
Okay, 767A.
This one mandates workplace culture surveys for city agencies.
Workplace culture surveys. Those can be kind of hit or miss, you know?
How so?
Sometimes it feels like they're really trying to get to the heart of things.
And then other times, it's just a box to check. Like, yep, we did the survey, everything's fine.
Right, right. I think in this case, though, it reflects a growing awareness of just how important a healthy workplace is.
Right.
Even, or maybe especially in government. Right.
For sure, yeah.
And by requiring these surveys,
Mhm.
the council is, I think, aiming for more transparency and accountability, even within its own ranks.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, we're not just going to talk about a positive work environment. We're actually going to track it.
Exactly.
Hold ourselves accountable. I like that. But let's be real. Not everything on the council's agenda is going to be all sunshine and roses.
Definitely not.
What about the more, shall we say, spirited discussions? Where did the council butt heads?
Well, one that jumped out at me was INT. No.
908A.
908A. Okay, what's that one about? This one proposed giving the city council more oversight over certain commissioner appointments.
Ah, so it's city council versus the mayor. Classic.
A bit of a power struggle, yeah. So basically, those who supported it, they argued that it would provide a crucial check and balance on mayoral power.
Sure, so the mayor can't just put whoever they want in those positions.
Exactly. But then, of course, those who opposed it,
Yeah.
they probably argued that the mayor needs the freedom to choose their own team.
Right.
And that too much council involvement could, politicize things.
It's like that old saying, with great power.
Comes great responsibility.
Exactly. Did 908 pass?
It did ultimately pass,
Okay.
but it faced some opposition.
Who voted against it?
We've got council members Borelli, Hanks, Palladino, and Yeager.
So not everyone was thrilled about the council potentially, like stepping on the mayor's toes.
Right.
It's a good reminder that even when a measure passes, those dissenting voices are important.
Absolutely. And speaking of diverse viewpoints,
Oh, is this about to get juicy?
we can't forget about the zoning battle that erupted over LU 5556.
Zoning. The word that can start a fight in any New York City neighborhood.
Tell me about it. This one really got people fired up.
So what was at stake with this LU 5556 thing?
Okay, so this proposal was all about giving businesses more flexibility in terms of where they could be located and how they could use their space.
Interesting.
So supporters probably argued that it would encourage economic growth and adaptability, right?
Makes sense, but I bet the opponents weren't thrilled.
Yeah, not so much. They were probably worried about things like increased traffic, strain on infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe even, the character of their neighborhoods changing too quickly.
It's like that everywhere in the city. We like it the way it is.
Right. Classic inbangbyism.
So how did that vote go?
This one really highlighted those divides within the council.
Oh, really? How so?
Let's see. We've got Areola, Banks, Borelli, Carr, Dinowitz, Hanks, Holden, Lee, Louis, Marmorato, Mealy, Narcisse, Nurse, Palladino, Yeager, and Zwang all voting against it.
Wow, that's a lot of no's.
That's like half the council.
Well, definitely a hot button issue.
Definitely. And speaking of hot button issues, we can't wrap up without talking about those migrant workforce and health surveys we mentioned earlier.
Oh, right. Those kind of got lost in the zoning battle.
Yeah, they flew a bit under the radar.
But those are really important, especially now with so many new arrivals to the city.
Exactly. Intiedo. No. 84A and Intiedo. No. 85A.
So is the council just trying to get a handle on the situation?
I think so. They need to gather information before making any big decisions.
Makes sense. We'll dive into those more when we come back after the break. So before the break, we were talking about those migrant workforce and health surveys. INT, no. 84A and no. 85A.
Right. Those were definitely some of the quieter items on the agenda, but important nonetheless.
Definitely. It seems like the council is trying to get a handle on the situation with all the new arrivals to the city.
Yeah, they're trying to gather information before just jumping into any big policy decisions.
Which makes sense. You need to know what you're dealing with first.
Absolutely. Imagine trying to put together a puzzle, but you have no idea how many pieces there are.
Or what the picture even is.
Exactly. So these surveys, they're about getting a clearer picture of what's actually happening.
So it's about understanding, the scope of things.
Exactly. How many people are we talking about? What are their needs? What are their skills?
With the workforce survey, are they trying to figure out, what kind of skills and experience these new arrivals are bringing with them?
Yes. That's exactly it. It's about understanding the potential of this new workforce.
Because I'm sure a lot of these folks are eager to work, right?
I would imagine so, yes.
And they probably have a lot to offer.
Right. And the city needs to figure out how to tap into that.
So is that data going to be used to connect folks with jobs?
I would hope so, yes. And not just connecting them with any jobs, but jobs that actually utilize their skills.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Like, are there certain industries that might see a boost from this new wave of talent?
I hadn't even thought about that.
And then there are questions about, like, what kind of job training programs might be needed.
Right, to help people get up to speed.
Exactly. It's about turning what some might see as a challenge into an opportunity.
I like that. Okay, so we've got the workforce survey. What about the health survey? What are some of the key questions there?
Well, I think a big part of that is assessing needs and making sure people have access to health care.
Sure, which can be tricky in a city as big and complicated as New York.
Exactly. So they're probably looking at things like, what are the primary health concerns within this population?
Right, because those might be different from the general population. Right, exactly. And then there are things like language barriers to consider.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And cultural sensitivities.
Because you want to make sure people feel comfortable accessing care.
Exactly. So this data, it's crucial for figuring out how to allocate resources effectively.
Okay, so it's about painting a full picture of the situation, both with the workforce and healthcare needs.
Exactly. It's a huge task.
It sounds like it. Are there any things that could, like, trip up the city council as they try to implement these surveys?
That's a really good question. I think one potential pitfall is just the challenge of gathering accurate information from a population that might be, well, hesitant to engage.
Yeah, because they might be worried about how that information will be used.
Exactly. There could be language barriers, cultural barriers, even just a lack of trust in government.
Especially if they're coming from places where, the government wasn't always looking out for their best interests.
Exactly. So building trust is going to be absolutely essential.
And how do they do that?
Well, I think working closely with community organizations is going to be key.
Those organizations that are already on the ground working with these communities.
Exactly. The ones who have already built those relationships.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's not just about getting the data.
Right.
It's about how you get it.
Absolutely. It needs to be done ethically and with sensitivity.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this City Hall deep dive.
We really have. From traffic cameras to migrant health surveys, it's been quite a journey.
It has, and I hope our listeners have a better understanding of, like, what their city council is actually doing.
Me too. Because even though these meetings can seem kind of, dry and procedural.
Oh, totally.
The decisions being made in those rooms, they affect all of us.
Every single New Yorker.
Yeah.
So as we wrap things up here, do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that local government, it's not some abstract thing that exists in a vacuum.
Right.
It's happening all around us every day, and it has a real impact on our lives.
So pay attention.
Exactly. Stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, make your voice heard. Because you actually can make a difference.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the New York City Council. Until next time, stay curious.